Hi, friends. On behalf of the Metropolitan Opera, welcome. My name is Susan Blackwell, and I'll be acting as your moderator today. In an offerance of accessibility and inclusion, my pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a white woman with long silver hair. I'm wearing a blue sweater, and the background in my Zoom square is a white curtain. And I'm coming to you today from Muncie, Lenape land. Presented by the Metropolitan Opera as a part of our celebration of Women's History Month, we are hosting this series of conversations highlighting the work of world-class creatives who happen to identify as women. We have so many friends joining us today, educators, supporters of opera, lovers of music, Met patrons and subscribers. And I want to give a special shout out to all the members of our Met HD Live in Schools community, especially our teachers and students. Whether you've attended a Met Opera broadcast of HD Live in Schools many times, or if you rocked the Met Opera Global Summer Camp with us, or if this is the very first time you're joining us for a Met Opera event, we are so happy that you're here. And you're in good company too. We've got folks zooming in from 5 continents. Hello to our friends in Zambia, India, Japan, Peru, and Columbus, Georgia, just to name a few. We're so happy that all of you are here today. Oh, I'm so excited. We are talking to 2 wonderful artists who have both directed on the stage of the Metropolitan Opera, Susan Stroman and Mary Zimmerman. So, ladies, would you please reveal yourselves? For accessibility purposes, I want to say that Susan Stroman is a white woman with shoulder-length blonde hair. Her pronouns are she, her, hers. The frames of her eyeglasses are red, and in the background of her Zoom square is a drop depicting the house of a theater, empty seats, and lights as if you're standing on a stage. Welcome, Susan Stroman. Can you say a few words so that our listeners can hear the sound of your voice?
Absolutely. I am thrilled to be here, Susan. So happy to be here and to share the screen with the wonderful Mary Zimmerman. So thank you for inviting me.
I'm so happy you're here. My heart is beating faster to be with both of you. And speaking of the amazing Mary Zimmerman is a white woman with white hair that is tied back from her face. Her pronouns are she, her, hers. The frames of her eyeglasses are dark. And in the background of Mary's Zoom square, it looks like she's in her living room with her windows behind her. And you can see the light coming in and the trees through the windows. Welcome, Mary Zimmerman. Can you say a few words so our listeners can hear what your voice sounds like?
Hi, I'm equally happy to be here and kind of nervous too.
Mary, will you please tell the people what you told us before we started this? Why are you a little nervous?
Oh, I'm nervous to be here with Susan Stroman, who I feel like is a very big person compared to my very smallness.
That is not true, Mary Zim. I'm excited to be with you. That is crazy. You're crazy.
Thank you.
I feel like this is just like blowing my mind. I'm so happy to be here with both of you. And I'd like to begin by asking you the question that we've been asking pretty much everyone for the past year, which is, where are you right now? And how are you right now, but for reals? And Mary, let's start with you. Where are you right now? And how are you right now, but for reals?
I'm in Evanston, Illinois, and I'm actually on my sun porch. And for reals, I'm kind of losing my mind. And not at all very happy. I'm also a professor, and I start teaching again next week online, which we all know has its challenges as well as its benefits. What was the other question that you asked? Was that just it for real?
Just where you are and how you are.
And how I am. That's about it, I think.
Can you tell us just a little bit about why, for reals, you're losing your mind?
No, honestly, and I'm eager to hear from Susan about this. To put it a bit grandiosely, we in the theater have been severed from our vocation. Like, we can't practice it not with other people. That's endemic and definitional to what we do. And so, like for me, the trying to do things online, not like this, but to do a play, it's a little like a restaurateur saying, come on in, the restaurant's open and here's your bowl of plastic fruit. You know what I mean? Like, it's not, presence matters and is real. And we're kind of rediscovering that all these things we've always said as tropes of the theater, like the audience effects, everything, that is all true, that is completely true. So, that.
That makes sense.
And
It
I'm
makes
also,
sense. Yeah.
Susan, I don't know if you're suffering from this, but just not being able to practice our practice, I feel out of practice. Like, do I even know how to do it? Did I ever do that? Was that a dream? Like that.
Yes.
Susan, will you tell us a little bit about where you are, how you are right now, but for reals, and maybe respond to what Mary just shared?
Well, I am locked down on 57th Street here in Manhattan, and
Holding tight on 57th Street.
I hold tight on 57th Street. However, I did get my second vaccination, so I went dancing out of that Walgreens like Isadora Duncan, a little out of control, a little feeling free. It was fantastic. And and it's spring, I'm feeling hopeful, but it has been tough, and to know that all the theater people have not been able to work. I've done a few things on Zoom, with some collaborators, and trying to create on Zoom, but it's very, very difficult, so I can't wait for this to be over, to be in a real room with actors, in a real room with singers and dancers, because it has been a long time. But I want to feel that the couple Zoom meetings I have had with various creative teams, perhaps when this apocalypse is over, we'll have something to begin with. So, so the creative juices have still been flowing, but right here in front of my drop, and I haven't done anything or gone anywhere. I did, though, however, learn how to cook. I couldn't boil an egg before this. And just out of necessity, about not going out, I learned how to cook. I can't believe it. Like really cook.
Really?
Yeah, by making the mistake of thinking I was ordering, well, I'll try one chicken breast, and I did it wrong, and I ended up getting 35 chicken breasts. So I had to pull all the vodka out of the freezer and put the chicken breasts in there. And then I thought, okay, I got to learn how to cook. I got to learn how to, start with chicken breasts. So now I actually find it quite calming and quite artful, and I'm actually enjoying it, which I cannot believe, So that is one good thing that came out of this pandemic.
I imagine that you haven't had a lot of, free time and downtime in your life up to this point. You're both incredibly busy. You're both incredibly in demand. So you haven't had time to perfect the cooking of your chicken breasts up until this moment.
Or any chicken breast, yes. That's
any signature dishes that you're really feeling yourself with?
I love my honey mustard salmon. I have to say, it's pretty darn good.
Smell you, Susan Stroman. I'm very impressed. It makes so much sense to me that both of you would have feelings, whether it's despair or chomping at the bit to get up and out. And Susan, who I'll refer to as Stro, just to differentiate between the two of us, and that is what you go by. So Stro, I know that you have been planting the seeds for you've been in development for various productions that you're working on. Mary, have you also been developing things during this time?
Well, just a little bit, because honestly, it's so precarious that no one can commit to an actual production date. And so trying to invest or commit is difficult. Now in opera, our time, advanced time is often much greater. And so yes. I think that probably has been going on more. One ironic thing for me is that the last thing I did was Eurydice, Matt O'Coin's new opera based on Sarah Ruhl's play at LA Opera, which is a co-production with the Met, which will probably be the next thing I do. And it's so ironic because, when we opened that and it managed to get its run in just before the shutdown, we were very lucky that way. We were all like, it's so long until the Met. It's a year and a half. Can you believe it? Now it's like the first thing will all be coming back. We're all coming back to. Yeah.
And
I have had little, we've been casting, we've been doing little things on that. That work has continued a little bit.
Yeah. Stro, will you speak a little bit about some of the seeds that you've been planting? I feel like you've been doing such interesting originating work.
Well, right before the lockdown, I was supposed to go up to Williamstown to direct the play Photograph 51, the Anna Ziegler play. And of course, Williamstown closed down totally. But Audible Books picked it up and recorded it. And they picked up all the plays that were going to be done that summer, and which was an amazing thing for Audible Books because they didn't have to do that, and they gave me 2 weeks with the actors and then 3 days of recording, but we did it all on Zoom, but at least there was something at the end of that, which was very good. The other things have been, I've been working on a couple musicals, but it's very difficult to do a musical on Zoom, of course, because of the delay. But I've been working with the different teams, and we were able to do 2 separate readings of 2 separate musicals, but it ends up being more like a film that you have to edit together, and the actors have to sing to their own phone, and it's a bit of a nightmare. But at least we went forward and created it, and now we'll have something. When I can go into the room, I would have done at least some type of reading and worked on it a bit. So that's a very good thing.
Yeah, it feels it. I have this sense that I'm just like, this is a time of planting seeds. And so I'm just trying to do that. But Mary, what you expressed at the beginning makes so much sense to me, and to, I'm sure, many people who are watching this right now. I would actually like to take a turn here and take it back to where it all really began, with the origins of your love for the theater. Mary, when we spoke this past summer, you told me a story that, if you will favor me, I would love for you to repeat. You talked about your primal scene of theater when you were playing in the woods and you stumbled upon something. Would you mind sharing that story again?
Yes, I've told this story many times, so I apologize to anyone.
Tell it again. Tell it again. Tell it again.
It does sound like I made it up, but I did not. So my family was went to England. My father was a Rhodes Scholar, and he was a physicist. And we spent some time in Cambridge, but then we were in a suburb of London called North Hampstead suburb. And our little house bordered this woods, which in very English fashion was called the Little Woods. And down the street was the Big Woods. Those were the actual And I was only 5, 6 years old, but I spent a lot of time by myself in those woods. Every afternoon after school, I would just go there, and I had names for various trees and so forth. And there was a clearing in the woods, a sort of formal clearing in the woods. And one afternoon when I was there, I stumbled upon a rehearsal of Midsummer Night's Dream, which, unbeknownst to me, was performed there annually in the summer. And here's my dog, come to hear the story.
Yes.
And it was the scene they were rehearsing, they're just in street clothes, was Ill Met by Moonlight, Proud Titania, where Titania and Oberon argue over the changeling boy. And then they departed, and Oberon ran in these circles with his fairy retinue. And I even, in my mind's eye, I believe they had like a gramophone that was playing some music, some little record player that was plugged in somewhere. And he was running and running in these circles. And then all of a sudden he started laughing and stopped. And he said, how many times do we go, around? And everyone just started sort of laughing and laughing, almost like falling on the ground, laughing so much. And I never, there was no moment at which I thought I was looking at fairies, or it was better than that. I was looking at adults playing, and in a really organized, sophisticated, serious, and yet hilarious way. And I had just never seen, the joyfulness that they had in their work. And I was very fascinated. And, I think I got my sister. In any case, I was watching rehearsal. And then, and this is true, the director booted us away. He told us not to watch.
It was a closed rehearsal. Wow.
Yeah, right.
In the woods.
In the woods. And we, later were taken to the production, which I remember very little. It was night already almost when it began. And I don't even know that I stayed awake, but
Yeah.
it was the rehearsal that got me, you know. It's
I
a true
just,
story. It sounds not credible, but it is actually, it's been confirmed by outside sources.
we believe you. I love hearing these theater love at first sight stories. And Susan, I was wondering if you could share your love of theater origin story as well.
Well, I think it was very little. My father was an amazing piano player, and so there was always music in the house. So I was that little girl who danced around the living room to her father playing the piano and creating stories and dance pieces and getting costumes and the whole thing. So that started even before I went to dancing school. So they, because of what I was doing, dancing all around, they put me in a dancing school, and so I was in dancing school by the age of 5 and was studying all of it, ballet, tap, jazz, everything, and continued to do that. Never really stopped doing that. So it was really that sort of passion for music and passion for storytelling, because besides being an incredible pianist, he also was a man who told big fish stories. So, to this day, I don't know if those stories are true, but it was instilled in me about how to tell a story, how important it is to tell a story. So for me, that kind of combination of the music and storytelling led me into the musical theater, and I started to actually really, I was in the shows, but I started to very early on be in charge of the shows or create the shows. So when I came to New York, it was really to be on the other side of the table, not to so much be a performer. But when I came to New York, I couldn't just come to New York and take over. I came as a song and dance gal because I could sing and dance, and started to do shows, but always in my mind, I wanted to create for the theater, and that's all I ever cared about. And I think that started from when I was little, playing to his music and dancing to
Yeah.
his music and creating, being able to have the freedom to create yourself. So I know that started at a very early age.
Do you remember how old you were, Susan, when you started when you started choreographing and directing and sort of taking control of the room
Well,
or the backyard or whatever it was?
well, sure. It was in high school doing local community theater, and even being in charge of the halftime show. I was in charge of the halftime show.
Halftime show.
Yeah,
Oh, like at the football game or something like that?
yes, yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Yes, of course. So whatever I could get my hands on to create and be in charge of, it was early. It was in high school and college, and I grew up in Delaware, and in the Delaware area, there was a lot of community theater, and of course, being very close to Philadelphia, there was also a lot of community theater. So, I couldn't get enough of it. Once, I was just hooked on being a part of it.
Yeah, I love that. We have I think a timely question from Lucia. Lucia is a 4th grader from Portugal, and Lucia asks, when did each of you see your first opera? This is a great question, Lucia. Mary, do you remember when you saw your first opera?
I might have been, there's 3 I remember when I was a kid. I grew up in Nebraska, but my mother was a real theater maven and culture vultures, we used to say. There was a children's opera called The Bobolinks that she took me to. And then, believe it or not, Madame Butterfly, which we went to because she'd heard there was a real cherry tree on the stage. That was the draw. And the other was, and this is unbelievable, The Rake's Progress, when I was like 12. I remember the second act opened and there was this statue of naked people embracing or something like that. It's a big party scene, I think. That's all I remember, but it's not an easy opera. You know what I mean? It's not like a starter opera.
Yeah, but
Sullivan. There was a Gilbert and Sullivan Society that literally performed in a hotel, banquet room, and I loved those. Atlanta, outdoors. Oh, encores for some number with a guy jumping on a bed as he sang. Yeah, so those the comic ones were the entree for me.
Absolutely. Susan, do you remember when you saw your first opera?
Really, it wasn't until came to New York, and it was the Metropolitan
Sure.
Opera. I saw a huge production of Carmen, and
Mm.
it really stuck with me, and I thought it was beautiful. But it was my first real opera. I had seen in Delaware, I think, in an outdoor theater, Pirates of Penzance. So that was the close. I was a little close there, but the first time to really see, a big opera, it was at the Met, and I'll never forget it. And to think now to have had the opportunity to work there
I
is
love that.
yeah.
I love it. I love it. We have a great follow-up question. This was from Ellie, who is a first grader in Portugal, who happens to be Lucia's sister. And Ellie asked, what inspired you to do Rusalka, Mary? And what inspired you to do the Merry Widow, Susan? So let's start with Mary. Mary, what inspired you to do Rusalka?
Well, the way opera works, more than theater, I've found, and Stroh might agree with me, is that the general manager of the theater is the one who's often deciding what the season should be and what operas. And Peter offered me Rusalka, but I will say that I was very eager to do it. It's right up my alley. The kinds of things that I do in the theater tend to have fantastical elements, tend to be related to fairy tales or epic fairy tales, or and there's bodily transformations in them, or classic texts. So all of that was very much the kind of thing I do like to do. So I was very, very happy to do that.
Great. And how about you, Stro? What inspired you to do the Merry Widow?
Well, Peter called me about it, and
Peter Gelb, he is the
Gelb.
hookup. Yes.
I know Peter Gelb called, and I think right when Peter called, he really saw the Merry Widow as having a lot of dance. So he thought, well, what if we did a new Merry Widow and incorporated a great deal of dance in it? And I absolutely said yes right away. For one thing, the Merry Widow has several types of dance. It has folk dancing, and then it has the can, and it has ballroom dancing, waltzes. So it had great opportunity. And the other thing was to be able to change the set in front of the audience with dance and choreography, because many times you do an opera, then you bring in this curtain and you drag the set off, but this way, when you use dance, you can transition a set right in front of the audience. And I think Peter wanted to add that to the mix. So I was thrilled about it. It's such a fun piece to do. The music is so much fun.
I have to imagine this must be a really fun part of Peter Gelb's very demanding job to puzzle out what projects and what pieces would be a great match for what great directors and choreographers. And I think that's so interesting. I think in this case, these are really good matches. And that was a really good question, Ellie. That was a really, really, really good question. So some of you who are watching have been to the Met many, many times, and some have watched the HD live performances, but have yet to visit in person. Spoiler alert for when you do, the scale of the Met is huge. The stage is huge. The actual theater house where the people sit, it's just gigantic. And so my question for both of you is, do you adjust your direction to accommodate the scale of the space? Mary, do you find that you need to adjust your direction? I mean,
well,
the scope is just huge.
Yeah, in terms of the expressiveness of the directing is a very large job. If you mean direction in terms of the expressiveness of the singer, the music is adjusting their expressiveness. Do you know what I mean? The music and its demands is in a great part dictating their expressiveness. And it's like a tiger they're both riding and they're the tiger. You know what I mean? Like they're kind of on this in this score, which is bearing them up and which they are, staying on top of. But in terms of another big part of what a director does, which is conceive what is the physical body of this thing going to be? What's it going to look like? Are we going to set it at the time it was written, at the time the story takes place? Are we going to set it on the moon? What are we going to do? That's a huge part of our job. especially in opera, because the score is pretty set. You know, often when you're working on a new play, new musical, you are, or I write, you know, I write my own, you know, you're making that as you go, and that's all in development. But the score is kind of a given. And even if there are questions about it, that's usually up to the maestro, you know, what exactly that person feels should be done with what cuts are open and which are not, and so forth and so on. So a big job of you is just, what is the body of this thing going to look like? And yes, that is very scaled up. It just is. It's a big space to fill. And
Yeah.
even if you wanted to, like, what we call iris down the set, you can't do it too far because the people in the balcony wouldn't be able to see very far back on the stage if you close down that opening. So you've got this big opening to fill. And at the same time, there's this challenge of the fact that in any given week, there are 5 different shows on at the Met. And right off stage, all the other sets are living below, above, out in the street, in the hallways, everywhere. And, you know, maybe you can't use the lift because someone else is using the lift, you know, like it's a rep house, it's a repertory house. So, you know, pre-production to me is one of the most thrilling things. That's everything that happens before you go into rehearsal. And working out the design with people who are world class. That's not in any way an exaggeration, like world class craftsmen to build and to paint it, to sew it, and your designers, you know, it's so, you know, it's like the you can just almost realize anything you can dream of, as long as it sort of obeys the laws of physics. That's what I say. You know, you are bound to the laws of physics, but if
it's somewhere in the wings. Like,
yes.
Yeah.
And, you know, you're bound to the laws of the score, I feel like if you do want to make an onstage transition, which I always try and do to not have to stop anything, but just keep going. You know, there's only so long that aria lasts. There's only so long while they're madly changing something. And I don't know, Susan, if you've done this, but the Met has brought me back to some very old-fashioned tricks using what's called an in-one scene or curtain, where you play a scene down very far on the stage and there's a drop, and madly behind the drop, the set's being changed. We did that in Rusalka a lot. Rusalka normally has 2 sets. We had, I think, 7.
Oh my God, that's great.
but we never stopped. You know what I mean? Except at the proper intermissions. We just kept doing this in one switcheroo, you know?
That's great. That's wonderful.
Susan, same question. Do you find that you scale up when you're working in a space like the Met?
Well, yes. I mean, you do have to fill that space, and so you do have to think of things on a grand scale, but that's a thrill to think of something so big and how to get people on in time and such. But within this grandness, you do have to focus on that singer, somehow get that focus down on that singer. The other thing, you know, being from the theater, we have microphones, you know, and there are no microphones up there. So I have to make sure whatever that actor is doing, that singer is doing, it's all about singing. It's all about the note. It's making sure they're comfortable hitting the note. Whereas, you know, on Broadway, we sing upside down, hanging off the desk, or we sing because it doesn't matter because we have a microphone. So you're never thinking, I can't put the actor over there because I'm going to hear him. But not in the opera. There's even like little trick places at the Met where you sound the best, you know. And so it's making sure you know that, and making sure the singer is comfortable singing. And so that, and I was up for that and ready to go, you know. So, but it is very different from coming from a world of microphones. I mean, and unbelievably impressive, and you know, I can't believe how they sing at the Met, and they get that to the back row. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, if I could tag on to that, another thing that you have to think about is what are the sort of sounding board surfaces. So singers love if you give them a nice hard floor and some hard walls behind. And and I've also, I don't know, I'm sure every opera director's experienced this, like there's something lovely in the room, but you get in with the orchestra and you've just got to kind of shove it all downstage. Your best plans are not going to work because you can't hear the thing. Yeah, but that's just one of the rules of opera, right? That it's not just that everyone has such a beautiful voice, it's that they have that power. There are a lot of beautiful voices in the world, but there's just a handful, literally a few handfuls of people that can sing in that house, both gorgeously, accurately, and loud enough.
Yeah.
Like it's part of it. It's part of the rules of it, you know?
Yeah.
And who, so you are both, I mean, you're both such seasoned directors and seasoned theater directors, but how do you learn that there's, as Stro was saying, those special secret places on the stage that, are going to be optimum for getting that voice out, or that those hardscape surfaces? Who's teaching you that? Or are you just picking it up in the room as you go?
Usually the singer, usually Renee would say, this is going to sound good right here. Okay. So, the thing is, everybody up there is so wonderful. I love the chorus, the Met chorus is fantastic, but they were always so good about, very gracious and generous in helping to pull this off and wanting to be there. It's what is tricky for me, and I know Mary mentioned this, is that there's so many shows that go on in rep. That is new, that very new for me, that I would rehearse The Merry Widow. I'd grab my bag, I'd walk up the aisle. By the time I got to the top of the aisle, Madame Butterfly was on stage. They're ripping it off and dragging it off, and then boom. And it was like, oh no, because you want, in the theater, you want everyone to be devoted to your show, devoted to making it work. But it's like, the chorus has 5 shows to sing that week. But in that rehearsal, they give you full attention for those 3 hours. So you have to do your prep, like Mary said. Your pre-production has to be unbelievable. So when you go in there, you don't waste anybody's time.
Yeah, and, those chorus rehearsals, I'm sure you would agree, Stro, are the most tense. Your amount of preparation per minute for them is so extravagant. The moment, and they're so precise, like the second hand hits the hour and the doors open and 60 to 85 people walk in the room and look at you. And you are so, you feel so heavily the weight of their time and their lives and the cost. I heard some insane statistic about $20,000 a minute or something when the chorus is in the room, or something insane like that. So you just, it's just like a gun to your head. You know what I mean? You just prepare and prepare as much as you can. And I rely very much on my choreographer, assistant directors are very much on their feet and in hand in those chorus rehearsals.
It's almost like you have to divide and conquer a little bit, and with your associates, in order, and because you don't want to waste anybody's time, but you want them to learn it the way you imagine it, But then they also bring their own characters in there, which I think is fantastic. You say this is your character, and then all of a sudden it happens. So, I mean, they are the real deal. They're really wonderful.
Yes, they're the true residents of the Met, and I'm some hack passing through. Like seriously, they've sung with everyone. They've been directed by everyone. Seriously, it's. I always feel like it's their house.
Sure.
It's wonderful. So this is another question regarding approach. When you're working with opera singers, they typically have very prolonged experience and exposure to a role that may predate your work with them as a performer. So does that alter the approach that you take to directing them? Susan, when you're working with somebody who, like a Renee Fleming, who may have years of study on a part, how does your approach to directing shift?
Well, I actually didn't come across anybody not wanting to learn something new, or have, if any of the principals or secondary principals have done those parts before. They came in ready to learn something new. So I was very lucky. I'm sure, though, that is a good question. I'm sure that some directors face someone who has done this role in Italy this particular way. So getting them now into your particular production might be tricky, but I did not have that problem.
I find the resistance is seldom conscious. very often they state, I've done this many times, but I'm very eager to whatever. But, there's a kinesthetic body memory of having performed something and performing it successfully. Do you know what I mean? Like much lauded performance or appearance in a certain role, their body just kind of takes over. I mean, I found this in the theater when you remount a show with some of the original actors, sometimes years later, and you try and change something, they can do it in the rehearsal room. But as soon as they're on stage, it's like we just jumped back 5 years and they're doing it exactly like the body just sort of takes over. And I imagine with singing, like the kinesthetic memory in the body connected with that vocal production as well must be, it's just really that is something you go up against a little bit. But I've never much met like, this is the way I do it. I've heard stories of that. Like, this is the costume I wear when I perform, like actually bringing their own costume, but not in any operas I've done. That's a story I heard from a colleague.
There's a theme that we've struck on a couple times in this conversation, which is about learning the joy of learning something new, whether it's a role that a singer has performed several times and is preparing again for the Met, or you going into the Met and learning how to prepare for those chorus rehearsals, or learning where the sweet spots are on the stage from your colleagues that you're collaborating with. Isn't that a pleasure? I think it's one of the, I don't know. I just think that's such a joy. I love hearing both of you. I always love hearing really seasoned, accomplished makers talking about the joy in learning the new, because I think it's, what makes you great.
It is a joy. And I think it refreshed my life to start working in opera, but it's also a trauma. I don't want to downplay it. Like, everyone there is too expert and too busy to be holding your hand about anything.
Oh.
And, I feel like it's what they say about parenthood or whatever. You can't be prepared enough. You just end up running into the wall. You just are going to sort of run into the wall. I remember very early on, my stage manager said, "Can I speak to you?" I'm sorry, I shouldn't say stage manager, assistant director. It's a little bit different terminology at the Met. And she took me aside on lunch and she said, "Can I say something to you? You're speaking to the singers as though they're actors. They aren't. They're acrobats."
What does that mean?
That means that what they're doing is physically demanding and skilled in a way you can't begin to comprehend. And I also believe that the expectation that someone that can sing aria and sing opera on the stage of the Metropolitan Opera can also act is a gross underestimation and devaluing of the art of acting, right? We don't say it the other way around, like, well, surely Al Pacino can sing an aria, right? Surely John Malkovich can sing whatever. we don't assume that, because acting is the skill that constantly hides and disguises itself. You're not supposed to be caught acting, right?
That's right.
It's only hours later that you go like, that person was acting. That was, it's the self-erasing art. Opera is the self-advertising art. Like, it's a display of virtuosity. Come hear me sing this thing you've heard 1,000 times better than anyone. Like, it's a display of virtuosity, and it is a different mindset. When you get singers that can also act and have great presence on stage, it's miraculous. But you shouldn't suppose that it's a given. Because again, as I say, acting as an art and a craft it has various disciplines, schools of thought, history, study, years of, all of that, plus natural inborn knack for it. And it's not just present in everyone. So she was saying to them, I imagine I was probably using maybe a certain vocabulary that I might use with actors or something that was not their lingua franca, their natural language. I imagine it was something like that. That was my very first opera. That was like day 3, my very first opera at the Met, So, yeah. Oh, but also learning new things. Can I just selfishly jump back?
Yeah.
I, during the pandemic, have been teaching myself how to draw. That's my thing. And that has been an unadulterated.
You can trade meals for sketches. This is amazing.
That's been I just cannot tell you what that's been for me. But anyway, enough.
Wait, say more. So you've been learning to draw. Have you been teaching yourself? Have you been taking an online
literally taking
course?
like little starting with YouTube, and I started with that book, Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain, and which is famous for getting you started. And I'm just pretty obsessive about it. And I made progress really fast and had kind of a knack. And so that was rewarding, and people said nice things to me. And it's meditative and it feels creative. And I always did it as a kid, like almost everyone. But then there's a certain point when you're a kid where your skill level stop, there's a certain point you can't move beyond, and you get frustrated. You can't create what you're seeing because you don't know the tricks. And also your brain isn't there yet quite in terms of perception, I think. So I've never had a minute's formal instruction, but I've been really taken by it.
That's wonderful.
And I've always drawn little like cartoon panels and stuff. And I've always done like little costume sketch, I always sketch show things, but hideously, and it's just that has not been a trauma.
That's wonderful. You'll be able to design your next set.
That's right.
Yeah.
It will. You certainly will. The pleasure of it is standalone. It's just a wonderful benefit, but it will. I can also imagine it will be a means of communication for you now too, to be able to say.
It always was, sadly, but yeah, maybe more.
You've really upped your game. I love that. We've had so many great conversations in this series and beyond at the Met education conferences. And I think about people, we recently spoke with Sir Richard Eyre, who was talking about how during this time, again, you all are so in demand, you're so busy, you would have never paused to learn how to make, salmon and mustard or teach yourself to sketch. And Sir Richard Eyre was talking about how he has written 2 plays he's been meaning to write for years, but hasn't had the time. And I'm just like, I love how creative people have taken this time to not to be, I don't mean to be, grandiose, but to become more themselves and to explore some things that they just haven't had the time or the capacity to do. So it warms my heart. I love that. And I can't wait to see your sketches and eat that salmon and mustard.
All right.
Okay. So you are both what I would think of as a generating or originating artists, not simply interpretive artists, not to knock interpretive artists, but you're not just interpreters, you're makers. And you can originate whole cloth stories and pieces, and you're both originating storytellers. And I'm curious how that informs your work when you're directing existing materials at the Met. How does that inform your work at the Met, Stro?
Well, because there are many directors that just do revival after revival and such, but
not you, baby.
No, I think because you have that creative instinct. In fact, whenever you do an opera that's been done before, you treat it as if it's never been done before. You want it to have a fresh feel to it. And so I don't approach it. I approach it like no one's ever done this before, and I'm going to do it this way. And so you're not beholding to what's been done before. Now, in the opera, of course, we musically, the music is the star. So, and the musical director or conductor is the star, really. But so that doesn't change that much. Although I tried to change a few things, but that didn't work. So, but so you do have that, But I think if you approach it like you would do a theater revival, approaching it in a new way too, as if it has never been done before. Because why would you want to recreate, really?
Yeah. How about you, Mary?
Well, I was going to say, yes, you definitely have to ask yourself, like, well, what can we do to, why a new production? You know what I mean? Like, what can be fresh and new and vital and alive? But I also, for myself in opera, and this is very different for in theater, if I'm doing a Shakespeare play, well, Anyway, when doing opera, I do look at what the other productions have been, because I feel like the audience may well be very familiar with them. And I don't want to accidentally just recreate something. So in a way, I'm looking in order to avoid, if I have some idea and think it's so original, and then find that, that's actually kind of a standard, move on that opera or whatever. Like I have, I research other productions, and that's actually also how I learn the opera, more than just listening. For me, watching embodied performances of it is very helpful. And I've never found it too intimidating or or inadvertently I've replicated that or anything. In fact, I'm, arrogant enough to be watching it going like, oh no, I don't think I'm going to do it like that. You know what I mean? But that is how I learn it more, is by being embodied. That's easier for me and better for me.
Yeah, it's so interesting. We have a question from Molly Clausen, who's a professor in Georgia. And Molly asks, how does your identity as a woman impact your directorial process and your ability to find work in a male-dominated field? Stro, how about you? I want to just say that I'll take a little trip around the mulberry bush and then come back to this. When I was asked to moderate this series, I was like, oh, I'm so excited to talk to these people, but I don't, this is a very privileged thing to say, but I don't, when I think of my identity, I don't think woman first. I just don't. And that's super privileged. And I stand on the shoulders of people who have flung doors open so that I can sort of just be like, I'm me. I'm just this weirdo. I'm just me. So when I ask that question, sometimes I'm like, identity as a woman. But with all that, how does your identity as a woman impact your directorial process and your ability to find work in a male-dominated field? And we'll start with you, Stro.
Well, it is true. It is a male-dominated field, but it is less so now. When I started, it certainly was. 30 years ago, it really was. And in fact, I don't think it's changed to maybe the last 15 years. It's been heavily male-dominated. But I not unlike what you just said, though, I think if you have a passion for what you do and you believe in that you can contribute something to your art, I think I just went forward. Like I just thought, I'm just doing this, and and didn't so much be apologetic for being a woman, I think. And I think that's probably why I was able to keep going. And then there were some, very open-minded people who would give me a break, and knowing full well it's the first time they were hiring a woman, So, but that was never really discussed. It was just happened, And I think to this day, how does it inform your work? Well, women are better.
Say more. Say how.
Doing everything. I think in every way, multitasking, everything, and just, I think more than being a woman, I think being older now, I think I can now share with actors, share with singers, apply what I've learned in my life. Because in the theater, at least certainly in my life, I've lived in very highs and very lows, personal and professional.
Yeah.
And now I feel I have a lot to give, a lot more to give, certainly a lot more to give to actors. And I think whatever situation is in a story right now, I've passed through that situation. So I think being older and wiser now, not so much having a problem being a woman with it, but it's just that kind of life education that you have in the theater, and the idea that theater is a life force and everything you do around it is life. That I can now give to anybody who's standing in front of me, and that's more than just about being a woman.
Yeah, I love that. How about you, Mary? Your thoughts on that? Does your identity as a woman impact your directorial process?
To answer in a kind of technical way, I wouldn't know, because I've never been otherwise. I have no point of comparison.
Fair. Yeah.
Directors are very often, there's only one director in the room usually, and we're usually not in the room with each other, especially once
That's right.
we're
That's
not.
right.
There's only one of us. So we don't observe each other very often. And I actually wish there was a pathway to observe each, to sit in on each, even when you're at a professional level and everything. I don't think women are automatically better at everything. I think I learned a lot from both men and women. There have definitely been moments when I don't necessarily want to tell the story, but there's definitely been moments when I'm like, okay, I'm in such a gendered moment right now, like the way that was put to me or what's happening right now. But like Susan, I was always so driven. I was so driven by the show and just making the show good that rather than stop and fight that battle at that moment, I just, strategized around it and just got it done and leave him to heaven. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
and I find that when we're working, one of the attractions of artistic creative work is a kind of, for me, self-dissolving. And I'm very self-forgetful in the rehearsal room. I have no physical self-consciousness when I'm
Yeah.
working. I have very little consciousness of time. Again, being grandiose, I've always felt that something's coming through me and I'm having to just get out of the way.
Yeah.
And that's when it's really working, is just like it's 3 hours later and so much has happened. You kind of don't know where you've been. And the way I work when I make plays is I start with no script and I write it every night before rehearsal and stuff like that. So it's a very intense pressure cooker sort of situation. And I think that's maybe necessary to my own personality in order to achieve that self-forgetting that I find really productive. I don't want to diminish, though, the question or, the realities of the preponderance of our brothers, in all public spaces, mostly. I don't mean to in any way diminish that. And I'm not sure what it was that have allowed me and Susan to just sort of like not let it consume us and not let it define us or halt us for whatever
Mhm.
reason.
No, Molly, thank you, Molly Clausen. It's a very good question. Yeah, I marvel at that sometimes myself. Because I've been asked by my own students before, what is your perspective as a woman on XYZ? And I'm sort of like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I can tell you my perspective from one weird point of view, but not necessarily identified as a woman. But again, I think that my point of view on that is very privileged because people have gone before me. I feel I live in a time and place where I can vote, and I feel
Yeah. Oh,
by and
sure.
large, you know what I mean?
You weren't allowed to forget. I mean, you could never.
Yeah.
That for a
Right.
minute. Yeah.
That's right. It's a privilege to be able to forget. So
I do think women are more criticized more than men in every way, whether it's in theater or politics.
I agree.
And I think for some reason we are criticized more, because I'll be listening to somebody being criticized and I think, well, what is that about? And then I think, oh, I guess it's because she's a woman.
Yeah.
So there is that. So
Yeah.
I'm aware of that.
I feel that too.
Yeah. To your earlier point, Mary, I had a realization probably from talking to and interviewing directors that you cannot always be in rooms with other directors. And now as I move through the world, when I work with directors who I think are extraordinary, I make a conscious habit of telling them, you don't know this because you're not in rooms with other directors.
Yeah.
But when you do this and that, it's fantastic, because they don't necessarily get that feedback, or they can't observe it themselves because they're not in those rooms.
We love that. We love to hear things like that, don't you think, Susan?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll zoom in with you anytime and tell you how I think you're extraordinary, and I will be telling you the truth. I loved your description too, Mary, of that when you're doing this work, you are in flow. So your awareness of self does fall away. And Stro, I see you, I see your head moving up and down. And I think, yeah, that's the other piece of it. We sort of become, I don't know, just not to get totally woo woo on you, but just our pure energetic selves doing
Yes.
what we do. So that makes so much sense to me as well, which is, it's sort of a non-gendered place to be.
Yeah.
So this this time has flown by. I've enjoyed this so much. But I just want to wrap up with this question for both of you. This is a question for you, not as an artist or even as a woman, but as human beings. If you could go back in time, armed with knowledge that you now have, Stro, you were just saying that you feel like you have all of this to give now, this lived experience, what would you tell your younger self?
Oh, I'll let you take that first, Mary.
Oh, thanks.
Hot potato, Mary. Hot potato.
It's
Take it,
such a
Mary.
great question you want to answer with, some beautiful, and I just really don't know. I mean, look, I think there is this period in a conventional track of all of this when you get out of school and you are kind of in terror that you're not going to get to do what you want to do. Like you have no idea if you're going to be able to self-actualize. You just don't have anywhere to start. So I guess I would reassure myself about that. I don't know. I don't have much. It's such a huge question. I feel like I have to think about that. Like there's both good and bad things to say. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
watch out for this and please avoid this horrible mistake that you once made, you're on your way to making with people. But I would have been shocked, absolutely shocked that I ended up in the theater. Maybe it was good. I didn't know though. I mean, as getting to be a professional, I worked as a temporary secretary for years and years and years. And I just thought I was going to go on, producing this little thing that I saved up enough money to produce and then produce another. Okay, now I'll do another one. Like I had no sense of trajectory. Like
no grand scheme. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Maybe what you would say to your younger self is get ready to be surprised. Get excited.
Yeah.
How about you, Stro?
Well, it is a difficult question. It's too big of a question when you start, zooming back on your life. But, I think maybe, not to sweat the small stuff, I think that it's such a big life. And sometimes you see people be getting so upset about some little thing, and I think it's trying to see the big picture of your wonderful life. And one piece of advice I always give to students is not to be afraid to ask the question, because the worst thing that can happen is somebody says no. So if you want to try something, go knock on that door and ask that person that question. And the worst thing that can happen is they say, no, you can't do that or whatever, but not to live in fear, to have a fearless quality about how you live and not be stupid, but certainly to take chances, because really the worst thing that can happen is someone just says, no, you can't do that. And so it has to live your life with that freedom, I think.
Oh, I love that. It is a joy to spend time with both of you. And on behalf of the Met Education team, I want to thank these two awesome artists and human beings, Mary Zimmerman and Susan Stroman. Any last words for the opera lovers who are listening to your voices right now, ladies?
Thank you for being interested and supporting the Met and even coming to a program like this. It sustains all of us, and it's just moving. It's moving. The people from all over the world have this interest and this love that unites them.
Yes, I agree. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you all at the Met hopefully someday.
Ooh, those are good words. Those are good words. So we would like to invite everyone attending today to join the Met Education Department for the next Virtual Educators Conference on Saturday, April 10th, beginning at 12 noon Eastern Time and ending at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. This conference will focus, this is going to be a good one, friends. This is going to focus on femme fatales of the 20th century, and we'll be exploring two Met productions, Lulu and Electra. And the conference will feature a panel. Sometimes I feel like I want a contest. Here we go. This the panel of guests include famed actress and opera lover Fiona Shaw and the beloved Met star Susan Graham. The entire conference is free and all are invited to attend. Dan, would you please just pop that registration link into the chat? Wow. Thank you both so much. We also want to thank Corey Dosty for providing closed captioning services today. Corey's fingers were flying. And we'd like to thank all of you for being here. Until next time, stay safe, stay well. Thank you both. And thank you all.
Bye, bye, Mary. It was great to be with you. Bye.
Yeah, it's great to be with both
Great.
Susans.
Thank you. Thanks, Susan. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.